Jay. I'm the genealogy specialist at Maine State Library. And tonight I'm going to talk about one of the things that is one of the best new tools other than DNA to come out in genealogy in like the last 15 years. It's the full text search at FamilySearch. And this has been out to the public. It is still considered experimental, but it's been out since about June, late May, early June, in there somewhere. And it's been improving. I did a program back when it first came out. And so because it's been improving and they've made some changes, I figured that I would do an update. And so you guys can, again, see what you can do with this, see what the strengths and weaknesses are, and go from there. So let me start sharing my screen. Let's see, I want this one. And I'm going to turn off my video and I'm going to make it so I can see the chat. And I need the participant list so I can see if anybody else comes in. And move that. Yeah, I can't do some of this stuff before I turn on the screen sharing. So anyhow, as you can see, this is the regular front page to FamilySearch. This is the full text search is still not here. And what you need to do is go to the FamilySearch Labs, which is familysearch.org/en/labs, or you can go to Google or the browser of your choice and search FamilySearch Labs, and you will get this page. And what you'll do is you go down here, and it says expand your search with full text. Go to experiment. And you get this. And they've got a disclaimer still because it is still considered experimental. And what this is doing is, with the help of all sorts of basically computer magic, it is searching the full text of a lot of documents, many of which are not that well indexed online or traditionally in paper form. So many of the records you get here are deeds and probate. And traditionally, deeds were indexed by the person selling the land or the grantor or the buyer or the grantee. And you did not get an index of the witnesses. You did not get an index if one of the people involved said that they inherited the land from their father. You did not get neighbors indexed. On probate, you generally got the name of the person who was deceased, whose estate was being settled. And in some cases, you get minor children who are getting a guardianship indexed. But again, you didn't get other people, the other heirs. You didn't get the names of people that either the deceased owed money to or who owed the deceased money. And so this full text search is picking up those names, which can be very helpful. The other thing that this has been really helpful for, especially if you have a slightly less common name, is that some of the issues where if someone was living a town over from where you thought and it was a different county, and so you're looking in county X for probate or a deed, and it turns out they were actually in county Y, you can avoid some of that. So I'm going to give you some examples, show you some things that work, some that don't, and go from there. Now, here on this front page, you can put in a keyword. This can be really handy, for example, if you're looking to see if your ancestor sold land and you want to see if it mentions that a wife released her dower right, her right to a third of the value of the land if her husband died. And so, if you have somebody who's doing a lot of transactions, you could put in their name, the husband's name, and then put dower in the keywords and see which ones actually have a wife listed for dower. In the name, you can put quotation marks for the exact phrase. They're still not great on the, you get some variant spellings on this, but not as well as you do over in the searching the records part of FamilySearch. So I would suggest, say, if you're using the name Moral, and you sometimes see it ILL at the end and sometimes see ELL at the end, search both just to be certain. And then you see here where they have the spot for place and year range. I haven't played around with enough to know, but what I'm seeing in sort of the serious genealogist, professional researcher for discussions is these work less well than the filters I'm going to show you once we get into the searching. I'm not saying don't use them, but don't rely on them. So I'm going to put in a name here. I'm going to put in Lincoln Stetson, an ancestor of mine. His wife is one of my big brick walls. I've been looking for her since the fall of 1997. And I have 2 hints to where she was before she was married. Neither of them have panned out. So when this came available to the public, he was one of the first people I wanted to look for in case he bought or sold land from one of her relatives. Because, if he buys or sells land from somebody with her maiden name as their surname, it might well give me a clue. Or if he gets mentioned, say, in her father's will and probate file, that would help me find her. So anyhow, I'm going to just hit search on this. And I've put it in quotes because Lincoln is a name that's often geographic as well as a first name or a surname. And I'll show you the difference here. So with this in quotes, I get 138 results. If I take the quotation marks off, we get over 1.1 million results. So you can see why I want to at least start out with the quotation marks and see what I get for him. And what's really interesting on this one, Lincoln Stetson moves from the South Shore of Boston, the Scituate area, in the mid-1790s to Salem. He's a shipwright. Salem's one of the biggest ports and shipbuilding centers in the world at this point. He goes on a voyage to Japan. He goes on the first U.S. ship to go to Japan. But once he comes back from that, I have him pretty thoroughly documented in the Salem, Massachusetts area, and Scouts causing trouble here, sorry. From 1795, 1799, until he dies there in 1867. He marries Nancy Batchelder in 1810. She's my brick wall. But, I have him in census records. I have him in tax rolls. I have him in city directories. I have him in newspaper accounts all through the 1820s and 30s. They have 3 daughters born. But notice this first result is in Knox County, Maine. And it very clearly says Lincoln Stetson of Salem in the county of Essex. It's my Lincoln Stetson. I would have never thought to look for him in Maine instead of Essex County, Massachusetts. And so it turns out, I think, my reading of this, he's buying land from a Jacob Stetson. And I'll blow this up so you can see it. And I'm pretty sure that this Jacob Stetson is a cousin of his. And I'm pretty sure this is a case of Lincoln Stetson is buying this to help his cousin out somehow, because a few years later, Jacob has the land back. And so I think that's what's going on here. I don't think Lincoln ever intended to use this land to move to Maine or anything like that. He was settled in Salem. Now, this is an easy one for optical character recognition because it's typed. This is actually a copy. And oh, sorry, Scout just made life interesting. Scout, you need to get down. Sorry, but if we go back into this and go to the bottom of the page, you can see this was copied in 1923. And this is considered the legal copy now. And they were very careful about this, but they were typing them so they'd be easier to read and on better paper and all of that. So let's try another one. And I'm going to put in Zebulon Hill. Well, actually, before I do that, let's go into this one. Let's choose this one. And again, you get fairly nice 19th century handwriting. So again, this doesn't really surprise me that they were able to get the machine to read this, right? And you can see where Lincoln Stetson's highlighted. Here's the text they're working from. And you can, again, see this. But let's go back, and I'm going to search Zebulon Hill, and I'm going to hit search. And again, we get almost 6 million hits. That's not going to help. I happen to know this first one is the one I want, but what we're going to do is we're going to narrow this by place to United States of America, to Massachusetts, and to Essex County. And these filters seem to work better than putting the place in here, from what I've heard. And then we're going to go into year, because we've still got 40,000 records here. And we're going to put in 1600. And I know I'm looking for the 1690s. And I'm going to hit apply here. And we are down to 180 choices, which is a lot easier to sort through. So let's take a look at this first one. And this is a later copy. I can tell you right now, this was not written in 1687 to 1691. This is a probably 19th century copy. But if we go back, let's look here. Oh, which is the one I want? These are all where's the one that I want to show you? Let's see. Maybe it's this one. Nope, I don't think so. Nope, that's still the copy. Let's go down here. Ah, this may be it. No, that's deeds. I want probate. Maybe it's this one. So we're getting further back. This is not the one I'm looking for. This is the father, who's a cooper in Salem. And this is his probate file in 1699. And he mentions his son, Zebulon Hill, who had already died. It's the son's will I want to show you. But you get Philip Hill. And so we're getting into handwriting that's beginning to be a little hard to read, quite frankly. So if we go back to these search results, we can go up here, and in the year, I happen to know I want 1691. So we're going to go to 1600, 1690. Oh, we can't go further than that, but one of these, and I will find it here, is a very nice example of, maybe it's no, that's a deed or probate. This came up easily the other day. But here's another one. You'll notice this is, again, a nice, fairly nice, clear copy. This is probably written in 1697. I may want to look at that one later for other reasons. Where is my... So we can go up here in the collection. We want the wills and deeds, and we'll apply there. So we're only getting wills and deeds now. And why isn't, I thought I was, so we want 1600, 16, I guess it's not that early letting me make that distinction. Where is this one? I don't want the deeds. I want the probate, people. Wills and deeds. So it's all in there. There is one of these. Come on. So anyhow, it's here somewhere. And I want to bring this one up because it shows an interesting, why am I not getting the one I wanted? Because it had an interesting problem that I wanted to show you. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open PowerPoint, because I had this in a presentation earlier today. And so I'm going to stop sharing that screen and go into this and find the example I had so that I can show you. And now I'll share this screen. From the current slide. So here's, again, this is the Lincoln Stetson, easy handwriting. Here's the Zebulon Hill one I was looking for. I'm pretty impressed that the machine transcription of this came out well, because as you can see, this is not easy to read. Now, what's interesting is it does give you, as I showed you on the side, that it has the transcription, and you can see here there are places like during their natural libs, that should be lives. But again, this can help you if you're having trouble reading it, figuring out at least about where in the page something can be. What I have discovered is these document summary, the transcription is about what you'd expect, decent but not perfect. These document summaries so far, I have not found one that has been good. For example, this has Zebulon Hill drafted his will, exact year unspecified. It's actually there. It calls Zebulon Hill both the testator and his brother. It says that his father is William Trask. His daughter is Hannah Brooks. It's pulling names and it's not getting it. So this is not something you want to look at this point yet. You want to go straight to just reading the actual thing and not trusting that. Does that make sense to everybody? As I said, I haven't found one of these yet that was worth it, but most of the transcriptions I have been able to get enough out of to use effectively for skimming, and so on. So that's why I wanted to pull this particular one up, because it's a particularly egregious sample of this. So let's stop that screen share and get out of that and go back to the other one. And Sam and I both discovered recently that they have added many court records to this. So, for example, if we put in Simeon, let's see if this works. I've seen this on microfilm. I haven't seen it. No results found. Oh, because I'm in the wrong, I'm still there. So here we have Simeon record. And let's see, in Cumberland County, Maine, in 1804-5, he has a judgment he gets against somebody. He's recovered he is being recovered the judgment against. He's living in Buckfield, the Point. He's a laborer, and Edward Blake has a judgment against him in the at the Justice's Court before the Judge Luther Carey of $9.14. And, again, more about that. Here's one, a John Chafin of Buckfield has a complaint about, again, a judgment against Ezekiel Webb. And so that's nice. But if we go back to the results, this is interesting. It's a summary of a case against Simeon. I'm assuming the same Simeon record, although it may not be. And he's by this point in Dansville in Cumberland County. He's listed as a yeoman, and he's in front of the court for the crime of adultery with one Britannia record. Turns out that's his daughter. So he ends up convicted in criminal court for incestuous adultery. And the follow-up to this is that he ends up at the newly built state prison and ends up hanging himself, and is about the first prisoner to die at the new prison. So he gets solitary imprisonment for 70 days and afterwards confinement to be hard labor for the term of 4 years, and the sentence be executed upon him in and within the precincts of the state prison situate in Thomaston in the county of Lincoln. So these court records, as I said, Sam Howes and I found them almost simultaneously, but he beat me to emailing about it. And so you get, again, you are going to get people who are listed in as witnesses. You're going, for example, I'm going to reset this all the way, and we're going to look for Joseph Hammond. And go here to search. And we're going to look in the US and in Maine. Where is it? Maine. And we're going to look in, I forget which county it is, but we're going to hit apply. And he is going to be here in lots of things because he is a clerk of the court. And so his name comes up a lot. So that's something to be aware of. Now, one of the other things that is nice, and a similar one to what I showed you with Lincoln Stetson, where I just didn't expect him to be at Maine at all. Looking at the town of Dearborn in Maine, which no longer exists. It was broken up into several towns. some in mostly Belgrade in Kennebec County, but it's also a bit of it went into, I think, Somerset County. We'll see here. And we're going to put in the name Peasley Morrill. I think it's this way. We'll see. And so we are going to get records about Peasley Morrill of Dearborn in the county of Kennebec. But we will also, if we go here for Maine, whoops, we can then, for when Somerset was broken off, we can limit this to Somerset County. And so we now get him, when I did, oh, here we have one where you have him, he hasn't moved, the county line has changed. And so if you didn't know that, you might miss these records from Somerset County thinking he was still in Kennebec County after Somerset County was partitioned off. Does this make sense? Why it's worth, even if you think you've looked through something, it's worth double checking, because at this point, Maine's county boundaries were changing pretty quickly. And so, especially when you have something like this, where you have someone with an unusual name in an area where there was a county boundary moving, it may be worth double checking that you have found everything. And again, these are the court records. Very nice to get. And as I said, if we go in here, and you get these, we could then, when it comes up, come on, let's scroll in. So let's say we were actually interested in not Peasley Morrill, but let's see who else is in. So this is Joseph Patter. Let's say we were interested in him. We could then search him and see what else he comes up in. So that's very handy. I will tell you, I've helped a couple people and I've forgotten which names we used at this point. So let's go back here, and I'm going to reset this, and we're going to look for Elizabeth Putnam. And I'm going to put this in quotation marks. And her husband's name was Francis. So I'm going to put that in to see if we can narrow it. Oh, that didn't work. So let's see. So we're not getting any Elizabeth Putnams. Let's do Francis Putnam. Oh, and we're going to take this out. That's what's happening. So for example, in this one, this is actually the estate of a Nathaniel Putnam. And the traditional indexing of this would have only indexed Nathaniel and not Francis or anyone else here. So you have Francis, you have various others down here. And so that you're getting that way. Here's a case. It's a deed with a different Francis Putnam. I know what I'll do. Let's go here and let's put in Lucius Waterman. And so we are going to do place in United States. and Wisconsin and hit apply. And so, for example, you get, here's a probate. Where's the one I'm looking for? Not seeing it. But anyhow, you can get these where you would have one of his sons was named William. And so let's say I do this. Oops, I typed William incorrectly. So here you have, I think this is the right one. Let's take a look at this one. And so let's say I knew of William Waterman, but didn't know his father's name. I could look at this and find this as opposed to having to look through all of the Waterman probate. This is the right one. It's Rachel is his mother. And somewhere here, there will be a list of the other siblings. Whoops, let's go back one. Because it lists his siblings, including the half siblings from the first marriage. Here we go. And here you have Anne, wife of Calvin Searle. So again, if this had been a case of I had found a record for Anne Searle, but didn't know her maiden name, I could look for Anne Searle or Calvin Searle and find them with this probate file. So, let's say I'd found Anne and Calvin Searle as the parents of somebody I'm interested in, but I can't find a marriage record for them. I could look for them this way and see if she's mentioned in a will from her father or brother. And as you can see, you have John and James Waterman, and Harriet blank, wife of blank, by a former wife. Those of you who've seen my Chasing Harriet presentation, this is that family. So if I had looked here, so what you will find is if I go back to this and we take this out, we put in James here and we put Harriet here. Let's say I don't know where they are, and we're going to hit search. We've got a lot of records, but I could play around with looking at dates. Maybe I would put James in quotes. There are various ways I would play around with to see if I found this. This is not a great example because there are so many of them. But, again, let's put in, I'm going to put in, Jesse, Leroy. And you'll find that without any filters, there's only, as a rather unusual name, although she and her sister-in-law had the same name. She was Jessie Sears Leroy, and her sister-in-law was born Jessie Leroy and never married. And so here, these are, I don't know who these women are. I have to figure that out. But again, here we have the probate records that mention various Leroyds. And here's a deed, and then here's a burial record. Notice they've added this. It's a burial record from England. When I did the program on this when this first came out, these burial records were not there. But notice here you have a Helen Leroyd, we'll find this here. Come on. There we go. So for my daughter, Helen A. Leroy, wife of Addison P. Leroy. So what we would do is to go back here and say, oh, her father is Francis P. Putnam. And so if there weren't a record of this, now this is Massachusetts, there were birth records for this, there are marriage records, but this was in, what year was this? 1883. If this was in Maine at this point, there may not be a vital record. So this may be or in parts of the, Kentucky and Tennessee, you may get this without vital records. And so you're getting these types of things that it's dealing with figuring out in some cases. So if you have women where you're stuck on their maiden name, if you don't know their maiden name, or you know their maiden name and not their father's name, it's worth looking for them by their married name to see if they show up in a record like this. Because as I said, traditionally, the only name indexed for this would have been Francis P. Putnam. Does this make sense to everybody? Why you want to go through all of your various women that you're stuck on at this point to see if you can find them in with their birth family. I have found some wills with this working with patrons where we are getting every sibling named in the will, and then in the deed where like 8 siblings are selling the land so they can split the money instead of the land, because they'd each get like 1.3 acres, but by selling the land they get cash that they can split. So this is the kind of thing that this is really going to be wonderful for. And as I said, this starts here with up here. And so then you want to go down here and look for, there's the Leroy, and that can help you figure out where you are in this document, because it does highlight it both of there. And let's go up and let's see how this summarized the document does. I'm curious. So we have William Hart's will is this one, I presume. And then we get this second one, and it's still talking about William Hart. This is the transcription. We're not getting, here's the summary. It's just this bit, and you'll see it's mixing up these two records. It's treating both of these records, it's not reading that there's a change here yet. And that's what's happening here is you're getting William Hart's will and Francis Purley Putnam's will mixed up in the document summary. Does that make sense to why we're still having these problems? I'm assuming that within the next 5 years, at the longest, they will figure out some way to figure out how to tell the machine to split these, but they haven't yet. But the full text, we'll take out the summarize. This full text, you can figure out where the break is, because here you have here's the Francis P. Putnam farmer in the margin, and then you get the make this my last will and testament, and so you're starting a new one. So at this point, I will stop sharing my screen, turn the camera back on. Anybody have questions at this point? Or Sam, anything you want to add with your playing around with it?
I mean, some of the things that I found playing around with it are sort of some of the rules that we should be following anyway. So I searched for a name of a person from an Oxford County, and it came up in a probate file for someone with the name of his father-in-law that I have seen for 10, 15 years, but had not looked in because it was 15 plus years after he had died. And also the person on the envelope as the executor, it was not a name I had ever seen before. And so I've never opened it. Nope, the petition was from his son-in-law, and it was complaining about the brother-in-law, or the his son, I guess, the son-in-law's brother, um, that he had not, fulfilled his duty as administrator of the estate. Um, it ended up not being much because the result was that the person they put in charge of handling it said, well, there isn't one. um, but it was still a good petition, kind of helped. There's an iffy relationship sometimes between whether she is the daughter of, like, it's the right one. So it's more evidence for that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I've also sometimes seen deeds recorded several years after the transaction. They didn't bother to register the deed, and they didn't have to at that point. I think legally you do now need to, but in the 19th century, they may not have registered the deed until they wanted to go sell it, or the father had bought the property, hadn't bothered to register the deed, and to deal with the probate, they need to register the deed so it's part of the estate. And so that's the kind of thing that you will, you want to be a little flexible on the dates. You want to double check that it isn't a 7.5 year juicy probate file that the siblings were fighting for 7 years after somebody died, because I have seen those. And you get great information about why they can't stand each other, and so squandered the money, and no, I didn't, I was spending it on our mother. So yeah, this is a tool, and you want to use it along with all the other tools, including your common sense. If somebody is leaving an estate, 7 years before some of his kids were born, maybe it's somebody else with the same name and not the person you're looking for. I had somebody discount a will because the wife's name was wrong. Well, it turns out when we dug a little further, first wife died, man remarried, descendant didn't know about the 8 or 10 month marriage before the man died. But when we looked at the daughter's married names, it was clear it was the man we were looking for. And to me, that's one of the two biggest things out of this in many ways are that we can, to some extent, work around geographical boundaries. And I think they aren't here yet, but once we start seeing English parish registers, we may find that to be a really good thing, because we'll be able to look in a county and see a bunch of parishes at the same time. And dealing with women listed in many of these records by their married name, and possibly having relationships to her birth family stated, because they brought, she and her husband bought or sold land from her brother, sold land she'd inherited from her father, things like that, or she's just mentioned in her father's will that, if I look at something and, let's say I've got an Elizabeth Putnam in Essex County, Massachusetts, in the middle of the 18th century, and I can't find a marriage record for her, I may not have any other record that has her maiden name, because it was almost never listed in unlike in Scotland, or in Quebec, the mother's maiden name is not in the the baptismal record or birth record. And so you don't know where to start looking. You can't look through every probate record in Essex County, Massachusetts, or Cumberland County, Maine. But this lets you at least do a first pass to see if you can find her with her married name, or if you have names that the couple is often, doing business with or whatever, you can start looking for those names easily and not have to scroll through quite so much. And a lot of this will be first pass. You're doing this to find the possibilities, and then you'll have to, on some of them, do more research. On the other hand, sometimes you'll have it saying, I, Elizabeth Putnam, inherited this land, or Francis Putnam, my wife inherited this land from her father, Silas Miriam, and now we're selling it. And you get that so you can continue the research. But, I encourage you, if you haven't tried this yet, to give it a whirl. Take one of your annoying can't find something cases and see if, all you're going to lose is a little time at this point, and you may find something. They are adding more data sets frequently. They aren't always announcing them. I found the court records by accident. So, and I didn't realize they started adding some English records. So I hope that they've got a whole lot more English records coming on soon. I would love if they got some 17th and 18th century English parish registers done. And that 1690 will from the younger Zebulon Hill gives me some confidence that they'll be able to get a bunch of the 17th century records done. I'm not sure how much at this point they'll be able to do before 1600, but I'm guessing at least for the American records, you'll get a lot of the 17th century things done fairly soon, which gets you back to the initial settlement of North America by English-speaking people. So any other questions at this point?
I have one more sort of tip for.
Okay, go for it.
And I do the same thing when I'm looking at like newspapers.com or any of the other newspaper sites. Take a look at the indexing. So like the transcript that you were talking about. Take a look at how things may be spelled elsewhere in the document, and then try also, searching using that spelling. Because oftentimes, if that's how the character recognition picked it up there, it may be a common way that it's picking it up in other places. So definitely worth, and sometimes it's way off from what it's actually supposed to be. But I've found that's a very good trick to kind of broaden your search results.
Yeah, I've discovered in one document I was looking at, there were 14 instances of the name Wilkins. 12 of them were indexed as Wilkins, and the other 2 were as Williams. And fortunately, it was an unusual first name, so I was able to search Zadok Williams to see if there were other documents that hadn't picked up on the Wilkins, but I didn't find any. But yeah, that's a really good, and that's a good tip for newspaper searching as well. So, okay, at this point, I'm going to turn off the recording.